Hey, we might kick off. I think we've got everyone in the room. We'd like to say thank you and welcome for joining us for this Agony expert event this afternoon. My name is Amanda Smith. I'm coming to you from Pearl, and today we're going to be running a session with Tribus on Agile HR. And the music is overriding. There we go. All right. Thanks, Melvin, the music man, who's with us today as well. All right. So welcome to our Agony Expert series on Agile HR this afternoon. We're really happy to have you all here. And soon we'll be handing over to our expert for the afternoon, Desmond Williams. But just before we begin, we'll give you a little description on the background of why the Agony Aunt/Expert series. So probably in the good old days of our parents' time, etc., people used to go to an Agony Aunt to ask all sorts of questions. And so for the month of August, we have transformed that into an Agony Expert set of sessions. We've got 8 categories that we're looking through and 17 fantastic experts who will answer any possible question under the sun quite freely for you to learn and garner as much information as you could possibly want before transforming your organisations into something that will be different yet again. Today's session is definitely about Agile HR, and we're looking at how to transform big, complex issues, particularly for things that we don't even plan for, and getting them into more simple ideas that can be very applicable and make real changes to your organisation. So we have today Desmond Williams. He is our people advisory and organisational design specialist, and he is going to be speaking about Agile HR for you. What we're going to do through the session is learn how Agile breaks up these big complex issues and puts them into achievable slices of very valuable actions that you can take forward. So if we just have a quick look at Pearl, we'll give you some background of who we are. Melvin, if you want to change the slides. Thank you. So Pearl is an organisation of consultants and experts. We have more than 1,200 experts available to us, and we utilise their very niche expertise to help you and your organisations make real change based on exactly what it is that you require. So you can see we've got 8 strong divisions there of different expertise that we utilise. There are 6 core domains and over 90 topics that we specialise in. So whatever your request might be, we certainly have an expert that can fit the picture for you. From our business experts, we've got some highlighted topics based on people, digital innovation, sustainability, design, change management's a big one that's certainly coming through, as well as our general business strategy, etc. So a huge range of advice and expertise available to you, while today we focus on our very special one of Desmond Williams around Agile HR. So what we're going to do is just run through a quick agenda of what Desmond is going to take you through. So we're starting, it will be about 5 minutes time when we do start. So what we're going to do is have a presentation and a discussion that Desmond will lead you through. That will take about half an hour. And then we're going to open it up to the Agony expert questions that you will have. If you're going through the session and something pops into your mind, by all means, put it into the chat. We will capture it there so you don't forget it. But Desmond will also give you a great opportunity at the end to fire away using a totally different system as well to ask whatever it is that you like. And then we'll be closing up nice and quickly, certainly within the hour. So very happy to welcome you here. And without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Desmond, who will take the lead and show us all about Agile HR. So thanks for joining us. And Desmond, it's all over to you.
Thank you, Amanda, and good morning, everybody. Very nice to be here. I'm calling from Ireland, actually. I came home to visit my family and my parents. So very happy to be here and looking forward to talking with you today. Let me just give me a second so while I just actually share my screen. Okay. Great. Amanda, you might just let me know if you can see this. Great. Thank you very much. Great. Well, without further ado, let's actually begin then in that case. I have half an hour for my slides and then another half an hour for our chat. So very much looking forward to helping you understand Agile HR a little bit more and complement your knowledge in the area. So a little bit about Tribus. So basically what we do is we are we're basically an organization that helps individuals and organizations to develop their self-awareness, their social awareness, and their organizational designs and development to become more focused on the customer. And that's essentially what we do. So we actually use methods, agile methods, organizational design and development methods as part of that process, as well as helping with people with emotional intelligence and those leaders with emotional intelligence who are responsible to make that change. A little bit about me. So I'm an OD&D or organizational design and development expert. I have about 22 years experience working in various different countries and roles to understand people essentially better, or understand people and organizations better. So a lot of my focus is in consulting and coaching in the areas of organizational development and change management, and I usually work with senior executives in that area. So very much important in relation to agility and HR agility specifically is the behavioral aspect of organizational design and development. And that's something that I have done in a number of countries in Saudi Arabia, in Europe, and in Asia as well. So yeah, I'm an expert in emotional intelligence assessment and development. I'm a psychometric assessor for about 20 years. So what I do is I help leaders to understand themselves better. When they are going through their organizational transformations, it's usually the leaders that actually have to do those transformations. So part of that process for changing an organization into a more agile organization is essentially the leaders. So this is a key part of agile HR and leadership development. I lecture for a number of organizations in Singapore. I'm based in Singapore, and I work with the CIPD and ARI in Australia and the Singapore University, Management University as well. Anyway, apart from the bland stuff, this is a little bit about me from a personal perspective. I'm passionate about underwater photography. I haven't done it in a long time, but I specialize in macro photography. So taking very, very small pictures of little animals. I used to live in Saudi Arabia as well, and I miss my Saudi friends a lot. I had a great time. I used to live in Jeddah, where I completed my master's degree, specializing in international management. So the courses that are actually relevant to the topic that we're talking about today, the main one obviously is the ICP AHR. So I'm qualified and certified to provide the certification for agility and HR through IC Agile. And that is where a lot of the content will be coming from today. But also actually, it's very important to mention that there are other courses that we provide related to emotional intelligence assessment and development. So like I said earlier, leaders are responsible to implement any agile processes and transformation processes. So it's very important to support those leaders in that journey, either through confidential one-on-one coaching or through group coaching. So we're going to be making this session as collaborative as possible. So we're going to be using a system called Mentimeter. So you can actually participate in the session as much as possible. So what I would like you for everyone to do is to take out their handphones, their smartphones, and if you have a second screen, if you're blessed with a second screen on your system, you can use your second screen obviously, and go to your browser. But you would put in your browser either on your phone or else on your laptop or PC, and menti.com. So if everyone can go to menti.com, www.menti.com, I will let you know how we can actually use that for our collaboration a little bit more as well. So the first little Menti that we're going to do is to ask you where you're from. So what I'd like you to do is, once you've gone to menti.com, please put in the number that's listed above in the slide, which is 904585. And what I'd like you to do is to type in where you're from and where you're calling from today. This is just a little bit of fun, just to see, just to give you a bit of practice on Menti, to see where you are. So this is basically a word map, or so the more people who are actually from a specific country or region, that will show up. It looks like everybody is from Singapore at the moment. Is calling in from Singapore. Oh, there's one from Japan. Oh, fantastic. Great. Oh, a lot of people from the Philippines. Excellent. Wow. This is great. Great. So we have a large proportion of the Philippines, Japan, and Singapore. Brilliant. So we got 5 people who've responded so far. I know we have a lot more in the class, so we'll just take a little bit more time just to see if people can type in where they're from. So we've now 6 people who've completed. So it'd be great if we get up to about 20 people. That would be fantastic. So just to recap, if you go to your phone or to another browser and type in menti.com and then type in the code at the top of the screen. So it's 9,000 and then 4585. Great. 3 countries represented today. Fantastic. Up to 8 people. Good. 9. Oh man, oh fantastic. Great. Nice to have a Saudi colleague, or sorry, a Middle Eastern colleague as well. Fantastic. Great. South Africa. Wow, fantastic. I actually I was told by a South African friend of mine before I went to South Africa that that South Africa is the most beautiful place in the world. And I was it was funny because everyone says that about their own country, but actually when I went there, it was a really, really beautiful country. So welcome to from South Africa. Good. Okay, great. I think we're going to be a little bit pushed for time, so we're going to move on. But thank you very much, everyone, for trying to use Menti, and we will continue on as we go. Great. So these are some of the questions that we'll be addressing today. Some of them I'll be addressing actually in the slides. Some of them you might want to ask me towards the end of the presentation in the Q&A session. So these are some of the questions that I thought might be of interest to you, and that I get actually asked these questions quite a lot. When I'm consulting to clients and to different groups as well, and when I'm lecturing in different organizations. So I hope these would be of relevance to you specifically. Okay, so what is Agile HR? So we've all heard of the term Agile. We've all heard of the term, obviously, HR. A lot of you working in HR, obviously, but can I just ask you, maybe what are your thoughts on what Agile HR is? So again, I'd like you to go to menti.com, and type in, if you could, what are your thoughts, maybe a sentence or maybe a few words about what you feel Agile HR is. So again, go to menti.com and type in 9,000 4585. And yeah, there's no right or wrong answer. It'd just be interesting to see what your thoughts are about, well, what is Agile HR from your perspective. So let's take a moment to just to type in a few words or a sentence or two about, well, what you think Agile HR is. Adaptable and flexible, absolutely. Yes, adaptive, organizational adaptivity, sorry, and that's extremely important from a culture perspective. I find actually in a lot of the work that I do is that there's an expression, the culture eats strategy for breakfast. That was a quote from Deming. And organizations that actually have an adaptive culture are ones that actually are the most successful in a very dynamic world that we live in today. Flexible, absolutely. Responsiveness, yes. And I think the responsiveness that individuals and teams have is really where a lot of the agile world sits. Not stuck with systems and processes, adapts to the people and culture. Yes, I would say actually the people and culture adapts to the systems. Well, that the people and the culture adapts to the systems and processes. In fact, actually, they influence the systems and processes through value stream mapping, and we'll be talking a little bit about that later on. Ability to cope with VUCA, well said. Yes, we'll be talking a little bit about that later on as well. Innovative moves with what is required. Yes, and that is a very, very good point. It is customer driven. So everything about Agile and Lean even is all about customer centricity. And that's something we'll be talking about in a while as well. Good. These are some really good, really good points. I'm obviously dealing with a lot of very switched on people today. So here's another view of what Agile HR looks like, or what it is. So it is essentially the role is that it's helping the organization transform. So the concept that Agile that agility, that HR is agility in the organization is wrong. It is a facilitator of agility for the organization. You just because you have an agile HR person doesn't mean that they do agile. It is an organizational transformation process. So HR for Agile looks at how to design modern workplaces. So what we're looking at here is strategic workforce planning, job analysis, and job redesign as well. But more intrinsically, if you are looking to start agility in an organization, usually a good place to start is actually the HR function itself. And so here we're looking at looking at the actual HR processes themselves and making them more customer centric. There is something called the Agile HR Manifesto, and I won't spend too much time on this slide. I'm conscious of time, but essentially you can look this up on your own browser later on. But this is a very, very important principle that we follow in agility in HR. And so essentially in AHR, or agility in HR, we're looking to uncover ways of developing an engaging workplace culture and doing it by doing it and helping others to do it themselves. So we're facilitators as such. So in terms of principles and values, we value collaborative networks over hierarchical structures. Now, so you see that list down below, and we're not saying, however, that we have to do away with hierarchical structures. Some organizations actually are not ready for Agile, and that we need to recognize that as well. But we do actually look for opportunities to collaborate as well. So someone mentioned VUCA, and so one of the questions is, well, why is Agile important? It's important because we live in a very VUCA orientated world today. So in the past, there was low volatility in terms of markets. Markets were very much predictable. There was a small number of large players. And so with the disruption of technology, with macroeconomic factors as well, there's higher volatility. There's higher uncertainty around outcomes, and higher complexity around automation, the requirement for the development of new skills as well. And there's less predictability. So there's more ambiguity around, well, what the future will look like. So as a result, organizations need to be more dynamic, they need to be more change orientated, and in a way, another expression is that they need to be more agile in that respect. So agility helps with that VUCA dynamic. So a lot of the questions I get from clients and from teams that I work with is, well, are organizations really hierarchical? Will it really work? Will Agile work? And to be very honest with you, it doesn't work in some organizations. Some organizations are not ready for either leadership reasons or organizational design reasons. And it takes a lot of effort to be able to change that. But there's usually three pillars by which it is possible to influence hierarchical organizations. And those are in team and organizational design, role agility. So that's looking at job analysis and job redesign, looking at empowering individuals. And there's also obviously enabling teams as well. So what's the role of a leader in agility? Because essentially leadership in agility is the key to success. They provide the environment. They're responsible at a departmental level or function level or divisional level to ensure that actually the right environment and culture exists so that agility can flourish. And the old styles of leadership aren't conducive to that. And so providing what we call agile soil for the organization and for the culture is a critical leadership role that they have. Another aspect, there was a large piece of research that was done in Google. It took 2 years. It was called Project Aristotle, and they looked at what made an effective team. And this is quite interesting because it does relate to agility in organizations. And they found that that they assessed 180 teams and over 37,000 employees to determine, well, what was the most effective aspect of team performance. And it actually wasn't IQ. So it wasn't the team with the smartest people. It was the team that actually had the best collaborative aspects. They were able to talk things through. They were able to listen to each other with respect, and no idea was a bad idea. But they actually talked things through. Even if it was a bad idea, there was that space and trust that people could speak up, and that's what we call psychological safety. And so this is one of the key aspects of creating an agile environment that HR can influence as well. So what does that mean? Psychological safety. It's a shared belief held by members of a team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk taking. So in agility, you actually are leveraging or enabling the team to contribute to various what we call iterations of process redesign in very often. But people won't do that if they don't feel that that they have that element of safe to speak up. So this is a key part of enabling an agile organization, is creating that psychological safety. Because we all know that fear kills potentially good ideas. So if you actually have an organization that needs to be agile, because we live in a very VUCA world, and where innovation is required and things happen so fast, and products and services need to change very rapidly. We really need to rely on our staff to ensure that the upwards feedback of customer feedback, so the actioning of customer feedback needs to happen. It needs to flow upwards, and that won't happen if staff feel separate to the decision-making process, and if they don't feel enabled as individuals and as teams as well. So I'm going to actually show you a little bit of a video, and essentially this is going to be highlighting a key aspect of what it is to be like in an agile organization, and one component that is critical for success, and that is ironically failure. So let's actually have a listen. It'll only be about a minute, and please turn up your volume if you can't hear it.
There's a myth about inventors that all you need is one good idea and you'll make your fortune. But the fact of the matter is, you don't have ideas like that. Well, you start with a problem that you're having to solve, and you start building prototypes, hundreds of them, perhaps even thousands of them. And very often, the original idea or the original problem doesn't look anything like the final solution. So the important thing is this journey from prototype to prototype. And during that process, of course, you get hundreds or thousands of failures. And the failure is the starting point, because when something fails, you understand why it fails, and then you start to think of ideas as to ways you can overcome that failure. I mean, the cyclones for my vacuum cleaner took over 5,000 prototypes. That's 5,000 failures before I'd cracked it. So the moral of the tale is keep on failing. It works.
So I hope did everyone hear that okay? Maybe Amanda can give me a thumbs up. Okay, great. Thank you very much. So here we saw, thank you, Amanda. So basically here we saw that failure is a key part of success. And what Dyson is actually saying is that we have to prototype and we have to fail often to be able to get where we're going. And this is a key part of agile processes and agile methodologies. So rather than having a large project where we have what we call a waterfall project, which has a beginning, middle, and an end over, let's say, 6 months, we have what we call something called sprints, which are small prototypings, which is what we do. We plan, we do PDCA, plan, do, check, act, and we basically look at these small little cycles, and we prototype the service or product until we actually get it right. So the risk to the actual project itself is actually minimized because we're going through small little prototyping, what we call sprints in Agile terminology. So I thought that might be useful just to kind of give you an understanding that in organizations whereby failure is actually seen as actually something negative, this is a real cultural issue, especially actually working actually in high context or high context cultures, such as in Asia and the Middle East, actually, that this is actually a real issue because a lot of people are very afraid of losing face. But leaders have a very important role in actually instilling psychological safety so that people can actually make these mistakes and learn from them. There are a number of ways that you can actually develop that. And if you'd like, someone would like to ask me a question about how to do that towards the end, by all means, please do. So what's the difference between agile methods and mindset? Yeah, I would say there's an 80-20 rule. Successful agile organizations have around, maybe it's 20% is really on the agile methods. So those are like related to stand-up meetings, sprints, facilitated team coaching, things like that. But 80% of it is actually in the mindset and the culture. So the mindset of agile HR professionals is extremely important if you do want to actually start on a transformation process in the organization. Even more important is that the leadership team and the executive team need to have an appropriate mindset of change and of agility to bring that into reality as well. So yeah, but can I ask your opinion? What is your definition of a mindset? Because different people have a different perception of what mindset is. So let's actually go back to Mentimeter again. And which one do you think this actually is? So when we talk about mindset, is it the first one, is it a set of beliefs that are fixed and never changing? A set of beliefs a person has about themselves and their abilities? Or is it the last one of the three types of commonly held ways of thinking? So great. So someone's actually started to give their opinion already. So please, if everyone else, we've 32 people in the room, which is fantastic. Could you please go to menti.com if you haven't already, and type in the code 904585, so that we can actually get a good understanding of, just get people's opinion. What do you think mindset actually is? And mindset is a key aspect of agility in organizations. Spreading a mindset of agility is extremely important to get a critical mass of agility in any organization. So we've 8 people, we've 9, 10. This is great. Things are going excellent. This is really, really good. Excellent. 10 people, 10 out of 32. We only have 33% who are participating. So a few more, please, before we move on. Great. Excellent. Great, 11 people, that's okay. That's fine. I think actually if maybe you might be having some technical difficulties, but that's not a bad response rate. Good. Well, actually, the answer is actually a set of beliefs that a person has about themselves and their abilities. So in that, it's a bit of a trick question. So you can actually have within that a mindset of either a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. So, but a mindset essentially are beliefs about yourself and your most basic qualities and abilities. So these can be derived from your values, from society, and from the organizational culture as well. And so here is just a very brief slide on what a growth mindset looks like and what a fixed mindset looks like. And growth mindsets are key within the agile HR environment. As a practitioner in agility, this is something that you have to have, which is a growth mindset. So looking at things creatively, looking at things laterally, thinking outside the box, these are all actually growth mindsets, and being open to failure and seeing failure as an opportunity to learn. These are very important. Now, I could talk about this for a lot of time, but we don't have that much time. By the way, Amanda, how much time do we have left before we go to the Q&A session?
You've got 5 minutes or so.
5 minutes. Great. Excellent. Okay, I'll speed up then in that case. Great. Thank you, Amanda. Value. When we talk about agility, we always need to talk about customer value. And here's a slide by Deloitte, Actually, well, yeah, it's actually originally from Deloitte, but Systems Thinker actually came up with it as well. Um, Whereby we actually look at value being created, and employees need to actually have those four elements to be able to create value for customers. This is a key part of creating customer value, and part of that, an enabler of employees having a learning mindset and satisfaction, flexibility, and teamwork. You need to have a growth mindset and instill that in staff. The learning curve is the earning curve, as we like to say, or as Joss Burson says. And this is really, really important. As I said earlier on, an organization to innovate needs to actually to be able to learn and be dynamic within the VUCA world that we live in. And in the past, we used to have a very linear approach to learning. You get education, you go to work, and then you retire. But now it's all about lifelong learning. And all of these areas we need we're working on a daily basis. Good. And so learning culture, instilling a learning culture in the organization is critical to enable an agile organization. And above the iceberg here, you'll see all of the tangible aspects of creating a learning culture. But below are very important areas to consider about, well, are the leadership team aligned to the learning agenda, to the agile aspects of the organization? Is time allotted? Do people share information openly? And this has very much got to do with the culture of the organization. Some examples. So I think I would probably start off this before we go into the Q&A. I might just give you an example of thinking kind of like outside the box around an agile intervention. So when we look at organizational development, and this is where some of the agile projects come from, I'll give you an example. So there was a technology organization that I was working for recently, and they had a very unique product. And it was quite a complex product, and it wouldn't be very well known in the organization. And what was happening was that in terms of the value stream or the employee experience, individuals were joining the organization, and the induction process was taking place basically on day one. And individuals really across the new employee spectrum didn't actually have a good understanding of the technology that the company was using. Moreover, they didn't understand the culture or what was expected of them until they started going through the induction process. And the induction process, to be honest, wasn't really comprehensive. It didn't give a good flavor of the culture of the organization, what the different departments did. So when we looked at things from an agile perspective, I was helping the HR team to look at this in a more agile way. So one of the things that they felt was important was, well, when somebody actually signed their contract of employment, there was usually about a month before they started. So I asked them, I said, well, what can individuals do a month before they start work? Is there anything that they can do to start the induction process off earlier? So what eventually came out of the whole process was LinkedIn Learning. And so LinkedIn Learning, as most of you will know, is a platform. It's what we call a learning management system. And what they did was there's an opportunity on LinkedIn Learning to create a bespoke induction program, which is made up of LinkedIn Learning, generic programs that are found on LinkedIn Learning, but this company could also actually upload its own presentations, its own documents, its own videos, and for different departments. So what they eventually did was they uploaded an introduction by the CEO, welcoming people to the organization. They uploaded a presentation by the Chief Technology Officer for the organization so that they could understand the actual technological aspects of their business. And each different department would upload their own introduction aspects as well. So by the time the actual individuals started on day one, they already had a very good understanding of the organization, its culture. There was even a video of someone going around the different open plan areas to show what it looked like in the organization. So people were already hitting the ground running when it came to their induction process. It also enabled the organization to look at the learning culture. So each individual who was actually starting in the organization was assigned a company email address from which they were assigned their LinkedIn Learning account. And so it helped to develop a learning culture after people left for their professional development and their personal development as well. So that is a small little agile project. So it did away with a very mechanistic, perhaps maybe more traditional approach, and it actually it improved what we call the value stream, which is what we're trying to do in agile projects. So that's really it. Questions and answers time. I hope I'm not too much over, but now I'm very much looking forward to helping you to answer some of your questions. So what we're going to do is, maybe with Amanda's assistance, is to ask you to put in some questions. So these are questions that you might want to ask in your own company, that you might be struggling with at the moment, that you might like my advice. Amanda, do you want to add anything to that?
No, so I just want to say now is the chance for you to literally get all the value of what you personally want out of this, to ask Desmond something really clear and specific. And if you don't want to put on Mentimeter, feel free to just turn on a video if you want and ask the question direct. But otherwise, Mentimeter is the great place to go to. Fire away with whatever question you want, because this is one of those unusual opportunities to freely get what you need for your organisation and your own learning. But I'm sure they will give it a minute and some questions will start firing in.
Absolutely. If people are having difficulty with Mentimeter, and that is possible, depending on where you are, etc., by all means, maybe put something in the chat, in the Zoom chat as well, if you're having difficulty. So George Go has something to ask. So if I want to start implementing Agile, how do I start? Oh, great question. Well, I think actually the first place to start, and great, we've another question coming in, brilliant. So typically when, maybe can I ask you, George, what role do you have in the organization? Are you in HR? Are you in operations? Are you an executive? Maybe just explain to me a little bit more about your role. What type of role do you have? CHRO, excellent. Great. Well, if you're the CHRO, you will have your colleagues in the rest of the leadership team. I think the best way that I would recommend is to start having informal conversations with the rest of your colleagues around, well, what do they know about Agile? What is it that they feel are the major business imperatives right now? In your own mind, are those business imperatives, can they be answered by Agile? Are there Agile business development or organizational development initiatives that can be actually answered by Agile? One thing you can do is, once you get a good grasp of what's happening, maybe do an assessment of maybe some of the data that you have in your organization that might reinforce that change is needed, is required. The other aspect of assessment that I would do, or analysis that I would do, is in terms of your culture analysis. So if you do an organizational survey or employee survey, I would actually look to that to see which departments and which divisions would be more conducive to taking on Agile projects. And the question is, are those departments where you would like to start? And is the issue that the company is facing, does it lie in those departments as well? I think that that would be, so the analysis phase is extremely important. So getting buy-in from the leadership team around, well, what that might look like, the resources that are required is very important as well. So yeah, that would be I suppose an interesting place to start. What's the difference between Agile and change management? So change management is actually bringing the organization or a organizational development area from one state to another. Whereas Agile is actually a continuous process. So Agile is more related to a transformation process that is ongoing, whereas change management has a start, a beginning, and an end. So you're changing it from one state to the other. I hope that helps, George. So let's go on to another question. Getting creativity and innovation chats are important. How do you make people feel safe? It's a very good question. So I actually I do a webinar and a training session basically on creating psychological safety, and it's very much related to emotional intelligence. So the leader has a prime responsibility for creating an environment of psychological safety. So that can be done in a number of ways. So I'll give you a few examples. So if there's a leader in a department who feels that their staff aren't speaking up for whatever reason, one way of actually helping individuals to come out of themselves is to have a whiteboard session whereby you do something called meta planning, and that is basically you ask people to say, okay, well, we have this problem, and I would like for everyone to actually write down post-its what you think the actual problem might be. So one posted per idea. And then what you would do is you would actually stand back and you would let staff actually write out, well, what are the problems? What are in their view, the actual issues related to that problem? Now, the reason why this is important is because a lot of organizations have introverts who have very, very good ideas, sometimes much better ideas than extroverts, but they don't actually get that platform. So one way of actually doing that is to ensure that they're heard. And then, so when all of those post-its are on the board, usually the leader would ask one of those staff members to facilitate the grouping of those post-its into various different headings, and that would be a good place to start. Another way is for the leader to actually create psychological safety, to make them feel safe by them actually saying that they've made mistakes and that they actually were wrong. Now, this actually is quite difficult for leaders because when you're a leader, you're perceived and you're being told when you're being trained that the leader should have all of the answers, but the leader doesn't have all of the answers. And for the leader to say, well, actually, I don't know what we should do, or this is a mistake that I made, and maybe how can we actually do things better? That's something. Showing vulnerability as a leader is a very emotionally binding behavior for the team. So the team is saying, okay, well, if an individual in the team is saying, well, if my boss can say sorry, and if they actually are talking about their own failures, maybe I feel safe enough to share my own as well. So creating that environment takes time, but that would be those would be two examples of what I would do. How do you get agile in a big company? Turning a big ship around is almost impossible. Absolutely. And I was working with a very, very large insurance company in Singapore, and this was the problem that they were struggling with. And I have to be very honest. Essentially, the biggest change or the biggest dependency for getting that ship to start turning is the executive team. It is very, very hard to implement an agile organization if the executive team doesn't understand what agile is, doesn't understand what their role is in it, doesn't understand and isn't committed to developing uh, 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 and allocating resources to the actual project. So I would say that the biggest dependency is in turning that ship around is the leadership team. Now, how you do that is probably something I could discuss separately, but that is something that is the first place to start. There's no point actually, going into one department and using it as a test bed. Although, if it could be used as an example, as part of a wider intervention, but you really do need to get the senior executives on board first. How to be agile or start agile when facing great resistance before transformation is started? Well, again, you'd actually have to say, well, what is the business imperative? What's the burning platform? So usually a great catalyst to ensure that you develop an agile organization is for the leadership team to communicate to staff that there is a big problem with what's happening with the organization at that particular time. take, for example, banking. So in the past, we actually had we have a banking industry where there was like 5 or 6 banks, and that they controlled 90% or 95% of the market. These days, you have a lot of disruption coming from blockchain technology, fintech, and our customers are leaving these large banks to take up new accounts with better interest rates, better customer service, more dynamic services and products from these fintech organizations. So if a leadership team can communicate effectively to the organization that there is a serious problem, and if we don't change the way we work, well, then we may not survive. Now, that needs to be communicated extremely well, because if people start panicking, they'll start leaving the organization. So you really do need to have a structure to back up that communication as well, and a roadmap for implementing Agile in a way that people understand. So what does that look like? That could look like, well, okay, well, we have this product at the moment. We want to have a strategy that in 2 years' time, we're going to have this product and these services, and we'll have a very clear roadmap to staff that they can understand, that's clear to them about, well, what actually that would look like in real terms. So in this conversation, most of the time when people are feeling too safe, they start pointing fingers instead of bringing new ideas to the team. How do we handle such a situation? Yes, absolutely. You'll always get people in teams that will say, "Oh, that won't work. That's the way we've always done it before." And this is what I was trying to say about the fixed mindset. And so individuals who have a fixed mindset tend to see failure as a failure. Sorry, see a failure as something that's negative, etc. So how do you actually turn that around? So in my experience, again, the imperative needs to be top down, but also from a cultural perspective, you need to very slowly start allocating people on different teams, on small value stream mapping teams. So let me give you an example. So if you actually have one HR project I was working on, they were looking at the recruitment process. So when we're looking at the recruitment process, we look at the employee experience or the candidate experience. So the candidate experience is a measure of how effective the actual recruitment process is. So what we did was we ensured that the team themselves, they actually did a value stream. Now, a value stream is essentially looking at the actual recruitment process from sourcing, selection, or pre-selection to interviewing to onboarding, and taking down all of the different actual elements of that process, putting them on a whiteboard with lots of post-its, and getting the actual recruitment team, hiring manager, the maybe the technology people, and also maybe past candidates who've gone through the candidate process who are now employees, to be part of an agile team that will look at the value stream and what is going well and what's going wrong. So in terms of the candidate experience, what the individuals who were very negative were very vocal about, well, what was not going right, and that's not a bad thing to be vocal about, well, where the experience is not going well. But if you have a multidisciplinary team in a value stream mapping process, which is iterative, typically you'll find that there's actually a greater cohesion within that team, and things get positive quite quickly, especially if they're facilitated by somebody who has an Agile certificate, for example, or has an experience as an Agile coach. The next question is for Dyson. 5,000 failures is huge and hard to imagine occurring. What do you do when a team get 5,000 creative solutions when everyone looks at blankly at every time you ask them for an idea? It's a very good question. So the culture within Dyson is set up to expect thousands of failures. So when you walk into a culture like that, when everyone is actually going, great, oh, a failure happened, that's great, what did you learn from it? You very soon, your mindset will very soon change as well. So this isn't so. I would argue that the Dyson culture is something that is actually quite agile and quite evolved, especially from an engineering perspective, and that pervades the whole culture. But creative solutions are actually, everyone has creative solutions. And I think that the most creative solutions in my own experience are those that actually come from the coalface, or from where the customer interacts directly with the organization. That could be in sales, it could be in customer service, it could be in customer experience management, etc. So how do you actually think of a creative ways of pleasing the customer? Um, Using different channels and using different creative techniques to elicit that feedback is extremely important. One way of doing that is to have a blue sky methodology, whereby you have a facilitated meeting around well, what would success look like from a customer perspective. Very often, some of my clients actually bring in customers and ask customers to be part of the process, to say, well, what's going well, what's not going well, what might work and what might not work. And that can be quite a fun process in my experience as well. There's no right or wrong answer to creating that creative environment, but it does require the leaders to actually to have fun with the idea, and to coach people. So one of the aspects of creative thinking is that if I produce an idea that I think is a good idea, but the rest of the team don't, and maybe in reality it's not a good idea, right? How does a leader deal with that? How does a leader help me understand that may not be a good creative idea, but doesn't want to put me down, or doesn't want to disrupt my psychological safety? Well, one way of doing that is to say, okay, Desmond, that's an interesting idea. How did you come to that conclusion? What data did you use? Have you stress tested that idea before? What do you think might not go well with that idea if you were to implement it? And what do you think would go well? So it's helping me, as an individual who's just proposed this idea, to actually reflect on my thought processes when I'm generating the idea. So with the outcome, hopefully, of me realizing, oh, maybe that wasn't such an applicable idea anyway, but at least my boss helped me to come to that realization myself, without my boss or my team telling me, no, that's not a great idea because of X, Y, and Z. So it's about coaching. It's about helping the person themselves to learn about their thought processes, and how they come up with these creative ideas as well. Usually, how long does it take for an Agile facilitator to coach to see a positive outcome? It really, I'm sorry to say this, but it actually depends. It depends on the actual team. It depends on the context. It depends on the topic that they're actually working on. The example I gave earlier on, where the HR team wanted to come up with a more fit for purpose induction program that fit with developing a learning culture, which was the LinkedIn learning intervention that they did. That took about it took about maybe 2 coaching sessions, and then for them to implement it, it took about a month and a half. Now, it took about a month and a half to actually to define what they want. The 2 coaching sessions actually helped them to conceptualize exactly what they wanted. The rest of the month and a half was socializing the idea with the senior executive team, getting their buy-in, because each of the different divisional leaders had to do a video and they had to do a presentation which will be uploaded into LinkedIn Learning. So they had to socialize that. They had to get their backing. So that took about a month and a half. So by the time the actual the program was launched, they went through a number of iterations, because when the 2 coaching sessions finished, they had a good understanding of the principles that they wanted to follow. But then when they went to the C-level, some of the C-level had some very good very good feedback, and they amended what that template looked like. So they prototyped the actual what it looked like. They went back to the C-level as well. The C-level had a little bit more feedback, and then they signed it off. So that's called prototyping. So the worst thing that they could have done was, we've got a great idea, let's roll it out. And then when we're rolling it out, just before we roll it out, let's get the CEO sign off, or the C-level sign off, and that wouldn't have worked. So they prototyped the idea with the senior executive team, and that took about a month and a half or 2 months. Now, the interesting part, because in Agile interventions, as indeed with most organizational development interventions, they don't always go as planned. And that's okay, because in Agile, that's what you expect, because that's what prototyping is all about. So one thing that the team didn't actually anticipate for was that some divisional managers were better at developing their presentations and their little videos of their areas better than others. And what they didn't legislate for was actually a template that was required that would help the divisional leaders implement the learning management pieces that they needed to do. I hope that answers your question. Yeah. How often should a leader use blue sky thinking? Well, it's a good question. Yeah, great question. So again, it's like I suppose it's a difficult question to answer, because it's like saying how long is a piece of string. It really depends on when the team has hit a wall in terms of how it views the problem. So very often, well, actually, there's one case in particular that I remember when a team was stuck, and they brought me in to help them facilitate their thinking, and they had a technical issue which I wasn't familiar with. But what I asked them was, well, okay, well, who are the customers of this issue? And who are the stakeholders of this issue? And we discussed the stakeholders, we discussed this, the customers, and what the team decided to do was they had a block about, well, what about this particular issue that they needed to deal with, and so they got in two different types of stakeholders to come into the actual the blue sky meeting, because the blue sky meeting wasn't going anywhere, because they felt that they had exhausted their own ideas and they needed a catalyst, and that catalyst ended up being a stakeholder which was outside their department. So I would say yeah, I would say that would be an idea as well. Okay,
Desmond, it's me interrupting.
Sure.
So I was just interrupting because it's getting time to wrap up. And then so I just thought, as you're closing up this last question, we've had a great number of questions come through and you've done a great job at answering them all. So I just want to say thank you for doing that. If we can swap out your slides just for the moment, and we will just put up the last little bits and pieces as we close off.
Sure.
So I think it's been great. Certainly a takeaway for me. It's always fascinating how you create safe teams for everyone. So there is free thinking, there is agile thinking, and there's no fear associated with it. So everything we can do to get into that space with every employee we possibly can is definitely going to create better outcomes for everyone. I just want to say thank you and remind you that this was one Agony expert session, and we've got a whole range of them coming up through the month of August, and we'd love to see you at as many of them as possible. There's also the opportunity to complete feedback for us. So if you'd like to snap the QR code here and let us know, there's only 6 simple questions that are really easy to answer. And just let us know exactly what worked, what didn't work, what you might like to see differently in the future. And by all means, let us know if you want to request any additional topics or anything of interest. We're certainly here to listen to what it is that you're after and find ways to present solutions that you certainly need within your organisations to remain agile. But I just want to say thank you, Desmond, particularly for taking your time to utilise this and let everyone know all the hot tips that you have. And we're looking forward to seeing you again sometime in the future.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Can I just add to that? Just if people are interested in actually completing the Agility and HR certification, they can contact me on desmond@tribusagile.com. I might just put it in the chat box just for if people would like to contact me in relation to that.
Okay. All right. Well, it's getting on closing time for us. I think we've covered everything that we need to do. If there's anything left in the chat, we'd just like to say thank you for being here. We will answer any questions that pour on in after this. But it's been a great afternoon and we'd love to see you again soon. So thank you on behalf of people. We'll catch you later.
Hi, everyone. Please give us your feedback. You can snap the QR code and take 2 minutes. It's just 6 very quick questions. Thanks for that.